Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. What a great week this has been for cystic fibrosis. Tonight, we're here to answer some of your questions about the news we shared this week, the Health Canada application for Trikafta, and needed next steps to get this medicine into the hands of people who need it now. I'm Kelly Grover, President and CEO, and joining me tonight is Dr. John Wallenberg, our Chief Scientific Officer, Kim Steele, Director of Government and Community Relations, and Eric Mariglia, Associate Government Relations and Advocacy, who will be our moderator tonight. Eric, over to you for housekeeping items.
Thanks, Kelly. So we received a number of questions in advance of today's session, which we have grouped by theme. As you can imagine, we have lots of questions in regards to Health Canada approval, pathways for both public and private access, clinical guidelines, and pricing, among others. So I will read the questions we've received, and our panel will provide a response. If you wish to ask a question, please use the chat box. Due to a high volume of questions, and thank you for submitting those in, we may not be able to answer all your questions live. We will provide a written summary of the questions asked prior to and during today's session in our blog. We will provide a link of the blog on social media, as well as a link to the recording of this session. So Kelly, over to you.
Great. So this week we announced some news. We announced that a decision had been made by Vertex to bring CF medicines to Canada, and that Tricafta was being submitted to Health Canada for approval. I want to share some information on what we know, what we don't know, and why we shared this information with you. So last week, we were already seeing some promising signs as Vertex launched a Canadian URL, something that they've only done in select countries. I then received a letter on Friday afternoon from Vertex that they had made a decision to bring new CF medicines to Canada. There was little specificity in the letter because Vertex is not able to communicate about drugs that are not approved for use in Canada. However, we could easily infer that this was about Trikafta. We didn't immediately share the news in the letter because we wanted to do our due diligence to ensure it would not negatively impact the application process and hoped we would get final confirmation from Health Canada. However, on Monday, the news started spreading. Physicians learned about the news from the manufacturer in relation to the SAP program, and patients started to get wind and called us very eagerly for confirmation. So at that point, we knew we had to share this fully with all of you in our community so we could provide clarity based on what we knew, avoid rumors, and celebrate this moment, a moment that was so hard to achieve. So before doing so, we contacted both the manufacturer and Health Canada. We also needed to share this information with you as we will need your help to maintain pressure on the Minister of Health to ensure she lives up to her promise to fast track the review of Trikafta. We've been noting this fact in every media interview we've done this week, again to highlight in a very public manner the commitment that was made and our expectation for a fast review process. We've contacted Health Canada and understand that it can take a bit of time, even up to several weeks, for them to formally recognize the receipt of an application. And I understand that this additional waiting may be very difficult, but all signs remain completely positive. As soon as we get notice, we will let you know. So to confirm, Trikafta has not yet been approved by Health Canada, but there is an intention from the manufacturer to submit to Health Canada for review. This, however, is an enormous moment, a day we were not sure would come at all. And I want to send an immense thank you to the cystic fibrosis community for your tireless work to make this milestone possible. Our collective message has been heard. CF cannot wait. We need Trikafta now. I also do want to note that this day did not come as quickly as it should have, and we will not forget we have lost lives in the process. We're also mindful that there are 5% of Canadians living with CF for whom modulators are not yet available. Know that we will continue to push pushing further for innovative therapies for those members of our community too, pushing for therapies that will transform the lives of all Canadians living with CF.
Thank you, Kelly. So jumping right into the questions, here's our first question. Has Trikafta been approved by Health Canada? And Kelly, perhaps you can speak to this.
Yeah, so as I said, it has not. And I understand why people might have jumped there because it's a very complicated process. But no, as I noted earlier, Health Canada has not yet approved Trikafta. Vertex has committed publicly to apply to Health Canada for approval to sell Trikafta in Canada. Health Canada is our federal regulator of drugs. Health Canada will review Trikafta for efficacy, safety, and quality. And this is the first step in the approval of a drug.
Thank you, Kelly. Our next question is, what happens next? When will Trikafta be covered? Does this mean it will only be covered by private healthcare plans? Or, sorry, my screen cut out for a second. Or will it be accessible to all? Kim, over to you to answer this question.
Thanks, Eric. Just bear with me, folks, while I set up my screen here. So thank you for joining us. As Kelly mentioned, Trikafta is it's in the process of a Health Canada application. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what happens in the drug review system and how we are hoping Trikafta will proceed through it. So after a drug is applied to for Health Canada and approved, it typically would go to the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board, or the PMPRB, to have the maximum amount that could be charged for the drug set. So that's a maximum price that the drug can be sold with. So after that happens, it usually goes for health technology assessment. And that means essentially that the Canadian Agency for Drugs and Technologies in Health, or INES, its Quebec counterpart, will do an analysis of the drug in terms of the impact it has, and that information is used in decision-making of our public drug programs. So that gets us to about here. Then, depending on the recommendations, the provincial and federal drug programs will come together through the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance, the PCPA, to further negotiate the price down of a drug. And it's through those negotiations that drugs come to be listed on the public formularies, or not listed, as the case may be. So when it comes to Trikafta, what we are hoping for is that the drug could come in through Health Canada and get what's called an aligned review process. And that process would really cut down on the amount of time that Health Canada, the health technology assessment, so CADIT and INES, and the PMPRB had on the overall total amount of time that it takes them to review the drug. So that process could bring in a drug under 12 months. And of course, with Trikafta, that is much too long. We will need to definitely ensure, as Kelly mentioned, that we keep the minister's feet to the fire to ensure that we can get a really fast review through this part of the system. And I think just in terms of the assurances that we've received from the minister, we've also been in conversation with the public and the public drug programs, basically to say that when the Orkambi and Kaleido negotiations started, we asked then or we suggested then that Trikafta should be included in those negotiations. So it's our hope, and we have positive indications that the PCPA is already talking about Trikafta as part of those negotiations. And we've also called for those negotiations to be expedited. There's no timeline on them, so we need to make sure that they move quickly. And not only that they are expedited, but that at the end of the day, people are going to get broad access, and that the drug's going to get reimbursed as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Kim, and perhaps you can take this next question as well. Will the application to Health Canada start the long 2 to 3 year process of approval? Who made that decision, Vertex or Health Canada?
Yeah, thanks. So I kind of touched on that. I mean, it's the way in which that decision is made is that the manufacturer always has to apply for a Health Canada review. And so Health Canada does not go out and ask manufacturers to submit, no matter how good a drug is. So as stated earlier, the manufacturer has committed to publicly submitting Trikafta to Health Canada. However, we don't yet know the details of their application. So if the manufacturer is granted that aligned review, like I said, we can see that the front half of the system will move very quickly. But we need to make sure that it moves as quickly as possible. There could also be a different type of review called a priority review that is associated with the aligned review, but that would expedite the Health Canada portion. So until we really know what path the drug is taking, it's hard to estimate the time. So we have asked for clarity from Health Canada and from the manufacturer on what that path will be, and of course, when we know, we will report that out to the community. If an aligned review or a priority review is not granted, which would quite frankly, I think be surprising given the importance of this drug. But if that did not happen, then yes, a typical review would take up to 2 to 3 years at this front end of the system. And as we've seen with Kalydeco, it could take even many, many more years to come through the PCPA, the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance, before it's priced and listed on the provincial and federal formularies. So we will be working to ensure at every checkpoint that we are pushing for the drug to go faster and for the drug to have the most broadest indication. And we are encouraged that the federal minister has been speaking with the provinces and vice versa to try to coordinate efforts.
Thanks, Kim. And John, I wonder if you can speak to this next question. What will happen to those who are receiving Tricafta through the Special Access Program, also known as SAP?
Thanks, Eric. Good question. Obviously a concern. The SAP provides compassionate access to drugs that treat patients with serious or life-threatening conditions when those drugs are not available for sale in Canada. Access to those drugs is only considered when conventional therapies have failed or are unsuitable or unavailable. When a drug becomes available in Canada, so when it's approved for sale by Health Canada authorization, after this, the SAP will no longer accept new applicants to the SAP. The manufacturer, although the program is run by Health Canada, it's actually the manufacturer who provides the drug. And the manufacturer currently is providing Trikafta to those who have been through the SAP and been approved and are currently getting drugs. And the company has confirmed with us that patients who are currently on the SAP will be grandfathered by the company until they receive public or private coverage.
So I have a comment here that, John, I hope you can also address, and that's, here's hoping it's approved with the same broad prescribing criteria as the US and not the EMA's limited access. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eric. And that is a really important question. There's a long answer, but if we had time we might be able to get to it if we got more questions about this. But for now, let's go with the short one. So pretty much everybody in the community understands that people living with cystic fibrosis have 2 mutated copies of the cystic fibrosis gene. In Canada and the United States, a mutation called F508del is by far the most common mutation, and with up to 90% of people with CF in North America have at least 1 copy of it. That's where that figure, up to 90% of people could be able to get Trikafta. That's where that number comes from. In the US, the FDA has accepted that anyone with at least 1 copy of F508del is eligible to receive Trikafta. The other mutation is largely irrelevant by that. In Europe, people with 1 copy of F508del might be able to get Trikafta depending on what the other mutation is. If the second mutation is also F508del, so they've got 2 508del, definitely they're eligible for Trikafta or Kaftrio, as it's called in Europe. If the second mutation is what is called a minimal function mutation, which means that there's no functional gene product really, then that patient is eligible to get Kaftrio as well. But if, for example, the mutation is a gating mutation, then they would not be able to get Kaftrio. Gating mutations are partially functional, and they can sometimes be treated with Kalydeco or Symdeko. The FDA decision really is much easier, much more comprehensive, because there are a lot of mutations that we really don't know a lot about. So a lot of mutations not labeled as minimal function, we just don't know, we can't label them that way. So insisting that a patient be FMS, so F508 plus minimal function, could limit a lot of people with rare or unknown mutations from getting access, even though we know that they would likely benefit from the drug. The indications and clinical use of a drug are determined by Health Canada, the same as FDA and EMA, and they appear in the product monograph. So right now, we don't know what the label or monograph will say in Canada. I will say that typically Health Canada resembles more the EMA. They tend to rely on clinical trial information and they're pretty conservative, but we don't know for sure. And, you know, I want to say also that access isn't just really what's on the label. So that's the first level, but it's more complicated than that, because sometimes even what Health Canada allows for modulators is more inclusive than what our public drug programs actually use. Right now, we're working with the CF clinicians across the country to develop clinical care guidelines for Trikafta as part of a larger effort to create guidelines for the use of all of the modulators. And the guidelines will be based on published science as well as real-world evidence garnered from patients who have already had access. And once finalized, we'll provide those criteria to the public and private insurers, calling on them to reimburse the drug in accordance with those guidelines, which are likely to acknowledge that anyone with Delta F508 is going to benefit from the drug, regardless of the other mutation.
Thank you, John. Kelly, I'm going to provide this next question to you, and it's how much will this cost?
The question we get asked all the time, Eric, thanks for that. So we don't know what price the company will charge for the drug. What we do know is that it can't be above the ceiling price that will be established by the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board, the PMPRB, which we've talked about a lot. The PMPRB, as you all know, is implementing a new set of guidelines that will drive patented pharmaceutical prices down by about between 45 to 75%. So we're unsure how these new guidelines will be applied to Trikafta. We're seeking clarity, and we'll provide an update to you in the community when we know more. What we also know is that Kalydeco and Orkambi negotiations are going well. They're progressing well with Vertex and the PCPA, the body of the provinces that negotiate with the drug manufacturers. And we hope that this is an encouraging sign that will help negotiations on Trikafta.
Thank you, Kelly. Perhaps you can take this next one as well, and will this be covered by Health Canada?
So Health Canada does have public drug programs for First Nations, Indigenous and Inuit, Canadian Forces members, veterans, the RCMP, and a few others. But the bulk of public drug coverage is actually provided by the provinces. So right now, as I just said, the provinces are indeed negotiating with Vertex to include Kalydeco and Orkambi on the provincial drug formularies. We've been advocating to have Trikafta included in these price negotiations for Kalydeco and Orkambi, and that these negotiations be fast-tracked, and we're going to continue to push for that. What we need is for our public drug programs and the manufacturer to move swiftly through the negotiations themselves. Urgency is important, and for the provinces to make Trikafta available immediately after that. So as I said, urgency is very important, and we've been stressing that, and we'll continue to stress that.
Thank you, Kelly. John, this next one is for you. The question is, I am currently taking Symdeko. Is Trikafta better? Will Symdeko come down in price?
Good question again. Different therapies work differently in different people. So one might work better, or it might have more unpleasant side effects with no clinical benefit. On average, if you look at the clinical trials, most patients did do better on Trikafta than Symdeko. But on an individual case, it's impossible to say. It's necessary. It's best to speak with your clinician about what the best options will be for you. And with respect to price, well, Kelly spoke to it earlier, to Trikafta price, and we can't really comment on price. Private insurers may cover a drug after Health Canada approves it and the PMPRB sets a price ceiling, but our public players generally need a pharmacoeconomic analysis or a cost effectiveness assessment, if you will, from CADIT or INES before considering a drug for public coverage. And right now, Symdeko isn't covered by any public plan because the company has not yet submitted Symdeko to either CADIT or INES for that kind of a health technology assessment. So it's not clear it'll have any impact at all on the price of Symdeko at this point.
Thank you, John. All right, this next one is going to be for you, Kim. The question reads, super happy that it's coming to Canada, but I'm only covered until I'm 25. Or can be, never got covered under OHIP. So without private insurance, what's it looking like in terms of actually being covered?
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for the question. As we stated earlier, we have been speaking to our public drug program officials and our provincial ministers of health about coverage. Our national advocacy network has been right across the country, busy meeting with elected officials over the past year to really try to get the negotiations on Kaleidocone County started in the first place. So we have been paying very close attention to those, and everything is looking positive in terms of a good outcome. At least we're hoping so, and we will continue to push for that. However, until the provinces and the manufacturer negotiate a price, the drug won't be provided through public plans, and that's something that I think we need to, as a community, ensure does not happen. And once the decision is made by the public drug programs to cover the drug, to cover Trikafta, sadly, there is a good chance that the eligibility criteria will be restrictive, and that the coverage won't provide broad access as is needed. So, our public plans often limit access to more innovative drugs, including game-changing medicines like Trikafta, and we just can't let that happen. The impact that this drug has is too great to limit access to those who are the sickest, although they will need it too. We need to make sure that all who need it have access, and we will need to work together as a community with our clinicians to apply pressure to our public drug programs to make it so.
Thank you, Kim. Moving on to the next question. John, this question is going to be for you. The question reads, will Trikafta be available for CF patients that do not have the F5108del, but only have other mutations? If it will not be available for someone like me, will drug trials be planned in the future for my mutation to see if Trikafta might work for someone like me?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Thanks for that. So the product monograph produced by the FDA, as well as actually the one in the European one, they state that a patient age 12 and older who has at least one F508del in the CFTR gene may be eligible. The clinical trials studied patients with at least one F508del, and I'm not aware of any prescribing criteria that allowing use in patients without an F508del. So that's unlikely. However, as mentioned, we are working with our clinicians to develop use guidelines. So when a drug is approved, Health Canada's outlines the drug's indications and clinical use. And our provincial drug programs will determine who is eligible for the drug under what circumstances. We're repeating ourselves a lot, but it's because they're all the same. It's a lot of it's relevant. The prescribing criteria that our clinicians set out will be provided to our public drug program leads and our ministers of health to inform eligibility criteria. Chances are, as we've been saying, we're going to have to fight for broad coverage. So we're prepared to do that, to work with our community to make sure there's adequate coverage. Showing benefit in people without F508del could be really difficult because there are so many other mutations and so many of them are really quite rare, too rare for the most part to run clinical trials. There are some glimmers of hope. We want to work with our clinicians and with Health Canada to argue in favor of using certain lab tests, which now exist, like the ones developed by CFIT and Sick Kids, or rectal organoids that are being used in Europe to predict who will benefit. So you can do an in vitro test to see if somebody's actually going to respond to the drug or not. There is perhaps one other factor to consider. I did mention that a lot of the other mutations are much more rare. Certainly in North America they are, but as the company looks internationally, the proportion of mutations is different in other countries around the world. So they may consider, for some mutations, looking at the benefits of Tricafta there. I'm not aware of any that are currently looking at that though.
Thank you, John. This next question is, John, is going to be for you as well. And it reads, will people with lung transplants be able to take Tricafta? Have they done any trials with post-lung transplant CFers?
Another great question. In general, patients do not get modulators post-lung transplant. And the reason for that is because the clinical trials really focus on and demonstrate clinical benefit through improvements in lung function. And so to my knowledge, there are no clinical trials on patients post-transplant. Patients with other solid organ transplants, like liver transplants, may well benefit from a modulator, but that would need to be discussed with the clinical care team because of potential drug interactions with the drugs. So Tricafta is a combination of 3 drugs. People post-transplant are already on a slew of drugs. There would be concerns there that there might be some incompatibility. So that's something that really needs to be taken up on a case-by-case basis with the clinical care team.
Thanks, John. For this next question, what are the next steps for CF Canada? What can I do to help? Kim, this one's over to you.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, so what are our next steps? So right now we're seeking clarity from Health Canada and Vertex on what kind of review Tricafta will have and how long it will take. And of course, when we find out that information, we will share it with the community. We're also working with members of Parliament to keep pressure on the federal health minister to fast track Tricafta and to ensure the broadest Health Canada indication as possible. You may recall that we had an emergency access to Tricafta meeting. Out of that meeting came the formation of an emergency access to Tricafta all-party caucus. And we will be working with our colleagues at the CF Treatment Society and CF Get Loud to provide policy advice to that group that we are hoping can help us keep the minister to her promise and get that broad indication. And then finally, we will be continuing to apply pressure to our public drug programs and our provincial governments to negotiate Tricafta alongside Orkambi and Kalydeco to expedite these negotiations and to provide broad access to Tricafta immediately thereafter.
Thank you, Kim. So we're going to move along now to some of the live questions, and we will do our best to get to some of these questions. But as we said before, we will answer them and be posting them in the blog. So the first question that I have here for the live questions is there a form letter that we can send to Minister Hashu? Kim, perhaps you can answer this one.
We haven't created a form letter yet because we are still trying to clarify some information, but we will have new information tools and new engagement tools for you to use in the coming weeks. So please stay tuned.
Thanks, Kim. This next question connects to that. The question reads, is it too soon to start pressuring the provinces?
No, we've been pressuring the provinces all along. So, you know, if anything, it's time to step on the gas.
Perfect, thanks. The next question that I have here is who will likely be covered for if government covers only the sickest, like Orkambi in Saskatchewan, or who may benefit? This question I'll provide over to you, Kim.
I'm wondering if John might take this.
Yeah, maybe I'll
John,
take that one. I mean, it's not 100% clear. Certainly, there wouldn't be a lot of justification for governments to limit to only those who are the most sick, to be honest with you. You know, we had that recent publication by Dr. Stevenson and Stanojevic that showed, you know, if you bring this drug in to give it to those who would be normally eligible for it, you're going to see a massive improvement in the general health of the population. And as we've been saying all along, we're going to be fighting for the broadest possible coverage. I'd point out one other thing as well, is that, you know, there's the argument, and it's a valid argument to be made. When the clinical trials are run, it's on people typically with moderate disease. So they've got the lung function somewhere between 40 and 90%. The drugs were never really designed as rescue medicines, right? These drugs are really designed to start taking early on and to prevent the damage that gets accumulated. So, I mean, there's lots of justification to argue for broad coverage of individuals starting at an earlier age, not later, not when the disease is more progressed.
Perfect, thank you, John. Next question I have here is how long until Vertex submits / until Health Canada starts reviewing for approval? Kim, perhaps you can address this question.
Actually, I'll put it to Kelly if she's been in contact with Vertex.
Yeah, so my communication with Vertex has been that they are applying to Health Canada. And I realize that that is a bit vague. Has it left, as I said, at work, has it left the person's desk at Vertex? Are they still putting a period at the end of a sentence? They're not able to tell us that. It's an interesting set of laws, but they're not able to talk to me at all about drugs that aren't marketed or available on the market in Canada. So we don't know, but I do know I have a very good relationship with them, and they would not tell me that this submission was coming if it was not coming. So we have tried many angles, to be very honest. John and I are both contacting Health Canada to try and understand from their end when they will tell us that they've received it. And we will get back to you as soon as possible. I mean, this work is happening today and tomorrow just to follow up with them. So what I also learned, which I said earlier, is it does take Health Canada a bit of time to post this. Sometimes they will receive the application and they have a few points of clarification, which could be as simple as, who do I contact? What's the phone number? It could be innocuous information like that. But there might be a bit of to and froing between Health Canada and the manufacturer. So sadly, we just have to wait until they post it, and they don't post all the time when they receive applications. It can take, I forget whether they said it was at the end of the month. It's a government agency, so they're going to move as fast as that agency might move. So as Kim said, and I've said, we will let you know as soon as we know, and we are trying every angle to try and get clarification on when that submission has left Vertex, which I believe it has, but when we get confirmation from Health Canada, then it's truly real, and we'll share that screenshot, I'm sure.
Perfect, thanks, Kelly. For the next question I have here, John, I'm going to provide this one to you. It says, as exciting as Tricafta and this development is, there will be some who either don't have the correct mutations or don't tolerate the side effects. What is coming down the pipeline that holds most promise for the rest of us? Is the CFIT testing getting closer to the official approval?
Sorry about that. I had to search for my mute button. That's a really good question, and it's a really difficult question to answer. What's best? There is one other company in progressing forward with alternative modulators. And when I say that, that's actually one of the areas that, for me personally, is a bit of a disappointment, because we've lost a number of companies that were developing drugs along the line for various different reasons. And but there is one large pharmaceutical, AbbVie is still pursuing alternative modulators. We're cheering them on, and those have great potential. Other than that, there's not a whole lot in sort of the modulator space that are coming down the pipeline. There are some other drugs that work in a similar fashion, and there's certainly a huge effort being supported by our sister organization, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in the United States. For people who aren't familiar with that, they have what is called their Path to a Cure program, which was announced 2018, and that is a $500 million program looking for therapies that will treat those individuals who cannot benefit from Trikafta or from the modulator. So, that might include individuals with nonsense mutations who aren't producing any proteins. It could conceivably be people who don't tolerate the drug well as well. In addition, there's a great deal of research going on as well, looking at alternative pathways. So not specifically treating the CFTR protein, but there are there other ways of doing the same function in cells? Those studies are still in a much earlier stage. I hope that answers the question.
Perfect. Thank you, John. I've got the next two questions here, both relating to private insurance coverage. So Kim, you might want to jump in on both of these. The first one is, will CF Canada put pressure in insurance companies to cover? How? What is the role of private insurance companies to perhaps lessen the financial burden on the government?
Okay, I put this image back up again because I want you to see the pathway to private insurance here. And essentially, after a drug is approved by Health Canada and it receives the ceiling price, or the maximum price from the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board, the PMPRP, it can then usually go down for assessment for reimbursement for private insurers. However, increasingly, our private insurers are relying also on the pharmacoeconomic analyses that John had mentioned that our CADITH and INES provide. So it is often taking longer for certain drugs to be listed. With respect to the question of advocacy, yeah, I mean, this is an area I think that we have identified as a priority. Increasingly, the private insurance market is being looked to cover these drugs when public governments aren't. But there's a shift happening right now in Canada with respect to national pharmacare, and if we continue down that road, the reimbursement landscape is going to change, and the role that private insurers will change. So I think, with respect to actually getting Tricafta covered, there is work to be done here. We have forged some relationships with the Canadian Health and Life Insurance Association. I think we have some work to do to really strengthen our efforts in the private insurance sector. And I'll be honest, it's not somewhere we've spent a lot of time in the past, but we know it's a place we need to spend some time in the future and now.
Perfect. Thanks, Kim. For a lot of the questions coming in are fairly similar, so we may group some together. But one of the next questions here is, once Tricafta makes it through the approval process with Health Canada, do things automatically get approved for additional younger age groups as they are approved by the FDA? Or is that a new approval process in Canada each time a new age group is added? Another similar question is, what age can a patient receive Tricafta?
Well, I can certainly answer the part of that question. I might defer to Kim on the label extensions for what happens in the regulatory process. What I can tell you right now is that the clinical trials for, so the label currently would be based on the clinical trials that have already been finished. And so in the FDA and the EMA in Europe, it's both ages 12 and above. The clinical trials for the younger age groups are ongoing, and I'm trying to recall, but it's possible that the 6 to 11 age group is actually terminated, and they're just working on the data analyses at this point. So that one might be coming down the pipeline pretty quick. And the younger age group studies are also underway or getting started. So the results for those are going to be the exact process as to how the label gets extended to the younger ages. I'm less certain. Kim, do you know that?
Sorry, are we speaking about the Health Canada extension or a line extension in terms of reimbursement?
Well, I'm thinking Health Canada.
Health Canada, yeah.
My understanding is that the company would have to apply for a label extension, and then there's a process that has to go through to have that extension made.
Perfect. Thank you both. Moving on to the next question. When a drug is approved for fast track process, how long on average does that process take when fast track specifically? Kim, perhaps you can speak to this in terms of the priority review and aligned review.
Yeah, sure. If Vertex had applied for a priority review, Health Canada priority review, that would make the Health Canada review approximately 6 months, 180 days. And but then after that, there would be the CADIF review, INS review, there'd be the pricing that happens. And that could take anywhere up to 2 to 3 years, depending on the drug and just depending on well, let's face it, how many files Health Canada and some of those other bodies have to deal with. If the manufacturer has applied to Health Canada and given consent to do what's called an aligned review, the Health Canada process, the pharmacoeconomic process, cost-benefit analysis, and the maximum pricing would happen in an aligned or parallel fashion. And that could shorten those 3 parts of the system, the reviews, to between 8 to 12 months, though it could happen sooner too, if all the stars align. I think the challenge for us here is ensuring that the minister, does what we asked her to do and give us the fastest review possible. The other challenge, as mentioned, is when we get out of the Health Canada, health technology, and the pricing piece at kind of the federal front entry part of the system. Once we get past that, we still have a roadblock when we get to the negotiations. And those negotiations that our public drug programs do, there's no timeline on those. There's no framework on how long a negotiation can take. So we have some challenges of getting the expedited review at the entry point into the country, and then the challenge of getting the drug priced and listed quickly in a broad way in the provinces.
Thank you, Kim. Another group of questions that I'll read together and then pass along to one of you on the panel. First is, do you know how long it will take to get access to it? Referring to Tricafta. Similar questions, all in, regardless of coverage and costs, do we foresee access to Tricafta within 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Without false hope, is this a reasonable guesstimate? Another question here, more personal, my daughter's health has degraded in the last year waiting for Tricafta, which looks very promising. She may not last another year. If it is likely to be more than a few months before Tricafta becomes available, is there any chance of getting access to Tricafta through the SAP route. In terms of the SAP, perhaps John, you could speak to that, and in terms of the how many years or how long it will take to get access. Kim, you would like to address that?
I'm sorry to hear that anybody's daughter is declining. Sympathies to you. The access through the SAP should continue until the drug is approved by Health Canada, is my belief. And subsequent to that, during the interim period where things are being negotiated, prices are being negotiated, and looking for approval for or putting it on the provincial formularies, the company has in the past traditionally had a compassionate access program. I don't, I can't speak for the company, but if they were true to their previous behavior, we would see a compassionate access program from the company prior to putting the drug on the provincial formularies. Kim?
Yeah, thanks. It's a very difficult question to answer because we don't know what path Tricafta is on right now. We have reached out to Health Canada and to Vertex to ask that question, and that is a question we've asked our ministers. How long is this going to take? We are working at every part of the system to say we need this to go faster, and people, it's already been too late for some people. But to answer in terms of months or years, this is a system that we have in Canada that has not been able to answer those questions very well in the past. There's a lot of change going on. There's some opportunity through some of these new processes and the commitment to align. We might see things happen very quickly. We might see things get stuck. So we just have to make sure that as a community, we're pushing at every point.
Eric, maybe I could jump in here for a second. So one thing I'm going to say is we're not going to wait 5 years for this drug to get to Canadians. And I know Kim and John are nodding. We will not, and this community will not wait for that. We have a right as Canadians to have this drug funded in Canada, and we're going to do everything possible. To Kim's point, it's really hard to say because they're also changing the way they're doing things, so we don't have a precedent to look at. But we are pushing to have this as fast as we can, and urgency, and we're bringing that at every step of the way. But I know over the last year, look at what this community has done. We're at this stage with Tricafta today, coming to Health Canada because of this community. So I hope in the next few weeks, we'll be able to give a better sense of timeline to you, but know that we are not going to wait 5 years, or we're not going to have a Kaleido repeat. For sure we're not. And I think what you as a community have done will ensure that doesn't happen. And to the father that wrote in, please know that we're thinking about you and everybody else in the community that's in that position.
Thank you, Kelly. Perhaps Kelly, or you may want to answer this next one too, or Kim as well. Is it possible to enter Tricafta into the current negotiations with PCPA while Tricafta is still under Health Canada review? Secondly, would it be possible to conclude those negotiations while Tricafta is still going through remaining review processes? I know Orkambi negotiations are not the hot topic right now, but I would love for my son to be able to take Orkambi until he is old enough to qualify for Tricafta. I would hope we won't have to fight to get Tricafta into negotiations.
I'm actually going to pass it to Kim because she's going to be able to speak with more specificity about the process. I will say to launch that we have brought up Tricafta in the PCPA negotiations and asked that they start considering it before it even came to Health Canada. But Kim, I'll pass to you.
Thanks, and we share the hope that the children or anybody who might need a drug like Orkambi or Kaleido can get it as well. So, in terms of having a drug, a price negotiated for a drug that does not yet have Health Canada approval, I'm not going to say it can't happen. I'm going to say, though, that it hasn't happened a lot in Canada. It's not a common discussion or a common decision that our public payers come to. They usually want to wait to see the Health Canada indications and to also see what the health technology assessment is. Now, that being said, Trikafta is a tremendous drug. There's really great body of evidence that we have been in discussions already with the provinces and with the public drug programs. So, you know, it's not that it's impossible that an agreement could be found on price before the Health Canada indication. It's probably not likely, but again, if they can get to the Health Canada approval quickly and get through those other processes, there's nothing to say that it couldn't come right after or you know, at the same time that these announcements are being made, that the decision-making right through the system could be aligned if there is an intention to do so.
And I'll actually add just a little bit of speculation here and remind people that this is the company that did negotiate or spent a great deal of effort on negotiating what they called, you know, platform deals, right? All-inclusive deals where they were negotiating for their future drugs that hadn't even been through processes in other countries. So it's certainly something that the company is open to, and that may have an impact as well.
Thank you all. For the next couple questions, Kelly, I think I'm going to provide these to you. Will you have, the question reads, will you have a chance to know before approval by Vertex giving a heads up? And if so, oh, I just lost where the question went. Sorry, there we go. And if so, are you able to share with us, or is that confidential until the public is aware? Similar question, after Health Canada approves Tricafta, how quickly will CF Canada get the information?
Gosh, I actually, so the first part, I actually don't know. So I know Kim will speak to it. I believe that I'm not allowed to know anything from Vertex, or they're not allowed to speak to me until Health Canada has approved it. The rules do allow the medical director at Vertex to speak to our scientific officer, which is John, but he's not supposed to share anything. That's my understanding. So I'll let Kim clarify that, and then I'm going to have to get you to repeat the second part because I'm of that age that I can't retain it that long. So Kim?
Yes, sorry, Eric, can you just repeat the top of the question, please?
Yeah, so I'll repeat both. So the first part is, will you get the heads up,
Yes,
or is that information confidential? And then the second part's, once it's approved, Tricafta, how quickly will CF Canada get the information?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So yes, so pharmaceutical companies are governed by all kinds of rules of what they can and cannot talk about, both ethically and legally. And so it's not legally allowed for the manufacturer to talk about a drug that has not been approved by Health Canada. They can interpret that as promoting the drug. And this is one of the reasons we take so much care before we came out with this announcement is, you know, we don't want to say anything that's not supposed to be said that could, you know, cause Health Canada to go, oh, what's going on here? So the reality is we've done our due diligence and we know, you know, what we think is happening, and we've checked and had positive indicators, and so, you know, as soon as that application, or sorry, as soon as that approval is made, we will be able to talk to the company about it. But until that happens, we have to communicate both with the company and Health Canada and make sure that that we're following the law and the ethical requirements.
The other part of it, the second part was, we will be, or another piece I want to add is John and Kim and the clinician, and with some clinicians, will be working behind the scenes to try and get information into Health Canada so that, as John talked about earlier, so we get the right indications on the label. And so we may have different kinds of relationships with Health Canada that might, again, they're not going to be able to talk about a lot, but so we may know very quickly, and as soon as we know when it's been approved, not if, when it's been approved by Health Canada, we will be in a position to tell you. I don't think there'll be a big gap in that time, just with all of the different components.
Eric, I might say this too. I mean, the government knows that this is a priority because our community has let them know. So I think there's also political will to move as quickly as possible. We just have to hold their feet to the fire.
Great. I think we have time for one more last question before wrapping up, and I'll end with this. And do you have an idea of what provincial health ministers have to be pressured at this time? Kim, do you want to speak to
All
this?
of them. You know, I think we have some that are friendlier than others, but we need them all on board, and we need to you know, look for our champions. There are a few health ministers that have been really tremendous, but at the end of the day, they all have to sit around the same table and come up to the same decision. So full press.
And Kim, they all told us that they're waiting for Trikafta. That's why they weren't so excited about the other modulators. So here, guess what? Now it's here. So you can be excited with us and take action on that. And I think some members of our community have already started to message that on social media.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Kim. And thanks to everyone for tuning in and sending in your questions in advance. Please note this session has been recorded, and the information and the session will be shared. Kelly, over to you for closing remarks.
Great. Thanks so much for your questions. They were really, really great questions. And I know that many of you have hope and some of you have tempered that enthusiasm, which is completely understandable, as I think we have as well. We're optimistic, and we're also, as I said, we're not naive in some media's interviews. So we're going to continue to push, and that's what I can guarantee. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Eric, Kim, and John. Thank you to our communications team and our IT team for their support. This is a momentous time for cystic fibrosis, and we must continue, as I said, to push so that we see new drugs available as soon as possible for you, our CF community. So thanks so much for joining with us tonight.